All right, well, it's 6 o'clock. I am so excited to have all of you join us for our first ever Freeze Wild. And this is probably my favorite event thus far, again, because it incorporates native plants, which is one of my favorite things in the world, and ice cream, which is one of my favorite things in the world. So we've fused them together, and I hope you've all gotten your wonderful care package here, the Freeze Wild box, and picked it up at the garden the last 2 days. And we are just so joyous to do this event in partnership with Bert and Rocky's cream company in Claremont. Jolene Gonzalez has been just the best partner ever, and she's helped us steer through making these recipes for you. And we've done a lot of trial and error to make such big batches. And I think we've had the difficult duty of tasting, multiple samples to make sure that you are all going to taste the best ice cream you can taste today. So big shout out and thanks to Jolene Gonzalez and Bert and Rockies. We're just so glad to have them as partners in our community. And I want to introduce our awesome panelists today. So my name is David Bryant. I'm Director of Visitor Experience here at California Botanic Garden. And I am about all things public engagement at the garden, trying to build bridges between our community and the awesome world of native plants. And so ice cream is one of those great bridges. Danielle Wildeson is our visitor experience coordinator, and you might recognize her if you did Taste Wild. Or Arrange Wild. She's been our great Q&A moderator. And then we're honored to have Lucinda McDade, our executive director at California Botanic Garden. And she is just a brilliant botanist and someone who knows quite a thing or two about plants. And so we thought it would be wonderful today to kind of peek under the botanical hood of some of these plants and find out what's going on down there, why do they contribute such awesome flavors to these ice creams, and then why they're important, just as being beautiful organisms and also supporting our ecology. So welcome, Lucinda. Thank you so much for being on with us.
Super happy to join.
Awesome. All right, well, we're gonna get to it. Let me give you a lay of the land. I know you can barely wait. We're gonna go through each flavor. And so I'll cut off of this screen share so that the three panelists and all of you can enjoy the ice cream together. And we're gonna scoop our pints right here and eat it along with you and make our remarks. And then we're gonna go back into the PowerPoint, and Lucinda's gonna talk about the botany and biology of these awesome plants and their ecological context. And I'll give you a little bit of insight into the plants in a garden setting. And then I will also end up at the recipe section where I'll share some tidbits about my experience making these ice creams on a home scale. All right, so are we ready? Okay, perfect.
I'm ready.
All right, so here we go, Coastal Sage Yum, the first flavor. So I'm gonna back out of the slideshow there, and everyone grab, unless you already have, your Coastal Sage Yum pint here. I call this flavor an experience, and it's a good one. I think it's a good one. It's kind of like running through a coastal sage scrub environment and feeling all the Cleveland sage and other sages and aromatic plants rub up against you, and it is just wonderful, just wonderful. So go ahead and take a taste of that ice cream.
If you wake up slowly in the morning, I think this is the best one for a breakfast ice cream.
Ooh.
Yeah, this really wakes you up.
Oh my God.
Might be slightly an adult ice cream. I don't know. I'm eager to hear from those of you who have kids, how your kids feel about ice cream.
I love it so much. I mean, some people might say it airs on, Bed Bath and Beyond, but I think it's more. I think it's wonderful. It's just so distinct. It's a flavor that you can really only find here in California. And as someone who's used sages a lot in ice cream, I can tell you that there is differences between the different species. And this Cleveland sage is just giving a really wonderful kind of aromatic quality. It's just really great. Oh my God, it's so good.
Cleveland sage is kind of in the middle of our 18 species of sage in terms of having just the right amount of the really good flavor, not so much that you would be overwhelmed, but kind of right in the happy middle of good flavor.
Oh my God, that's great. All right, so
flavor in shortbread cookies, and I agree. In fact, a shortbread cookie kind of dipped into this ice cream would be delicious, wouldn't it?
Oh my God, that's so great. Yeah, I could imagine that in the coffee, the affogato.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to do a screen share again. We're going to go back to this PowerPoint here. And I'm going to ask Lucinda, can you share a bit about Cleveland sage and the botany behind it?
So Cleveland sage is one of 18 species of sage, the genus Salvia that we have here in California. It occurs in Southern California, sort of right around us. It's an absolutely gorgeous plant that needs essentially no water once it's established, and I highly recommend it for your garden. David, go ahead and go to well, let me just say that the fragrance of a sage and the flavor that you get when you taste it are basically side products of the plant's defense mechanisms, its anti-herbivory mechanisms. Basically, those chemicals are to try to deter things from chomping on the leaves. And in fact, if you look at these beautiful leaves, nothing has chomped on them, right? And so a lot of these plants that have these very strong fragrances actually have only specialist herbivores, larvae of caterpillars of butterflies, things like that, that have evolved specifically to be able to process those chemicals that are in the plant. We as humans are big enough that we're able to tolerate, amounts of these compounds without adverse results in most cases. I wonder what would happen if you ate the whole thing in sort of one sitting, but I think you'd be fine regardless. So Cleveland sage is a great thing to have in your garden where you have it. You can make sage pesto out of it, by the way. Sage pesto is delicious. It's very hard to go back to basil. I love basil, but very hard to go back to basil once you've had sage. So David, go ahead and let's look at some of the features. That has these very cool little flowers. The flowers are individually kind of small, maybe about an inch, purple, lavender. Notice that the part, I'm looking at the flower right in the middle that's looking right at me. Notice that the part on the right, the pure lavender part on the right, that's the female part, and that needs to get pollen put onto it in order for the plant to make seeds. And then the little orange things are the stamens, the anthers, and those will have pollen. And so that's what the flower is all about. We love them, but really they're about the plant's reproduction.
Isn't there some really amazing mechanical aspects about the flowers? Maybe not Cleveland sage, but
there are
pollinators.
some of them. Yeah, some of them have these very complex mechanisms where it's kind of a seesaw mechanism in order for the pollen to get deposited on the pollinator's back. This Cleveland sage doesn't actually seem to have that. That mechanism has actually evolved many, many times in the mint family. Your sages are in the mint family along with mints and basil and a whole bunch of other things that we desperately love as human beings.
Awesome, that's great.
And
do you want to talk a little bit about the habitat, about where Cleveland sage grows?
Sure. They occur in habitat very much like that right around Claremont, right at our elevation, and on down through San Diego County, and just barely get into Baja. This is a species that is really right at home, kind of right in our neighborhood, and pretty much right at our elevation, a little bit lower, a little bit higher, and right in our area of Southern California.
Wonderful. All right, animal relationships.
Lots of things. Love those flowers. Just love those flowers. These things have a bit of nectar down in there, and these, as these butterflies are showing you, and if the plant is doing well, the butterflies will be moving some pollen around as they visit the flowers. That's what it's all about. It's a mutualism that benefits both the pollinators and the plant. Arguably even more important for the plant than for the pollinator, given that the plant, it's all about the plant's reproduction, and the pollinator gets some food, but usually has some other options as well.
It's definitely won me over. I grow it because it makes great ice cream. So it's in my yard.
Yeah. And this is a hawk moth, by the way, coming in. Look at that beautiful, partially coiled up tongue. It's either backing up from just having visited a flower or going in to visit a flower. And as it goes in, it will uncurl that beautiful proboscis and probe the flower for nectar. And if people mistake those for hummingbirds all the time, it's quite interesting. They really can. They do have the same behavior of hovering as hummingbirds, and they can be a little confusing or a little tricky because they move pretty fast as well. And then there are the animals that just like to chow down on them, like our ground squirrels. Bad boy, leave that sage alone. But you know, actually, what I was saying about the leaves and the chemical that gives it that beautiful fragrance that we love and that makes it work so well for ice cream, um, probably the flowering stalks there probably have actually a little bit less of that chemical because the plant doesn't have to defend those for as long. It produces flowers kind of, this plant flowers in the transition between spring and summer. And then it just needs to make the seeds, which happens pretty quickly, and then it's done. Whereas the leaves are on the plant for probably a couple of years, all things considered, before the leaves drop off. And so they really defend those, whereas they probably don't defend these as much. And that's why the animal there is chowing down on that. Plus, it also probably gets a little sweet from the nectar as it chews through the whole inflorescence and destroys it.
I like to say they are kind of, the sage flowers are like nature's Tic Tac. They are virtually all edible in California, and maybe this ground squirrel is going to a function later or a socially distanced place, needs to get a clean breath.
You think it's eating it as a breath freshener, huh?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe.
Yeah, every ground squirrel I've ever interacted with has been very concerned about its breath.
Right, very cute.
Yeah. And then bees also visit them. Can't possibly be a pollinator because it's actually too small. You can imagine that it could easily get into the flower, get to the nectar without touching the reproductive parts. If it can't touch those parts sticking out to the right there, if it can sneak in under those, then it's not a pollinator. And the world is full of what are called nectar robbers, who basically are parasites on the system. And that's the way nature works. Where there's a resource, there will be organisms that evolve to take advantage of it. Can't blame them. Sweat bees are people too. Hummingbirds also, this hummingbird did not get the memo that long red tubular flowers are hummingbird pollinated. It thinks these Cleveland sage flowers look just fine. And it probably does a pretty good job pollinating because as it sticks its bill in, it probably does contact the anthers and the stigma and move some pollen around. And then I just want to tell you that one of the great things about growing this plant is not just the flowers, but the fruits. The fruits you will never detect unless you are determined to do so. You will never detect when your Cleveland sage is in fruit because the fruits are little tiny. They're basically just the seeds with a little tiny extra wrapping in the technical botanical sense. And there usually are 4 of them, but they're way down in that base of where the flower used to be. They're much, much smaller than the flower itself. And I went out once to trim back my salvia, my Cleveland sage, and I found that the shrub was entirely alive with a mixed flock of bush tits and these lesser goldfinches. Absolutely alive with it. And they were all going into these individual little receptacles, little calyces of where the flowers had been, and picking out those individual tiny seeds. And so I took my clippers and I closed them back up and I backed right on into my house to let the birds finish their enjoyment of the Cleveland sage. I should have told them that they should wait for the ice cream because it's even better with ice cream.
I think that's what's so wonderful. All these, you're seeing examples of herbivores and animals interacting with this plant from all different levels and phases of the plant's phenology. So the leaves and the flowers and the seeds, and now we're getting to enjoy the leaves, from in the ice cream.
Right. So I now know to leave my sage fruiting for a while so that the birds can come and get much of it.
Awesome. I'm going to talk just a little bit about Cleveland sage and other sages in a garden setting. And I'm not going to get maybe too specifically into the technical aspects of horticulture, but what I wanted to share were how wonderful and beautiful these native sages are in your garden. They are astounding. As Lucinda mentioned, there's about 18 species. Cleveland sage is one of them. They are kind of the sun landscape all-stars. So they can tolerate full sun, most of the species, and look beautiful in the process. Cleveland sage, if you're interested in planting it, I would definitely recommend a cultivar, which is a natural selection of that plant. So a horticulturalist or scientist was out in the wild, found an example of that sage, that Cleveland sage that they really enjoyed for whatever reason, and then brought it into the horticultural trade. And so some of the best cultivars include Allen Chickering. So that is a Cleveland sage genetically, but it is a specific form of it. And it's slightly more compact, but it just has these brilliant flowers, as you can kind of see here, these wonderful soft lavender-like flowers. And it just seems to really be very floriferous, which is one of my favorite terms, but lots and lots of flowers. Another cultivar is Winifred Gilman, and that one's so striking because it actually is more compact. It's smaller than, say, Allen Chickering is. And it has these almost blue flowers, really saturated and gorgeous. So we have a few of those over in our volunteer flower garden that Native Designs, a volunteer group, tends, and they're stellar. And I think there's still a few left. So if you're out walking, take a look there because the Winifred Gilman sage is great. And one last thing I'll say about sages in the garden is, like a lot of these recipes, a few that we'll share tonight and also in Taste Wild, you don't need, you just don't need that many much plant material to make a huge impact. So you only need about 15 leaves in this ice cream in a domestic scale to make a wonderful sage aroma. So that's why they're so great. You just don't need to harvest all that much. And so that brings us to the recipe. And so I just wanted to share a few notes about my forays into making this ice cream, and then we'll do a few Q&As and we'll jump to the next flavor. So in terms of the recipe, as I mentioned, I've actually explored a lot of different sages. One of my favorites is black sage, or Salvia mellifera. I think Cleveland sage is right up there as one of my all-time favorite sages to incorporate in ice cream. And so you all should have gotten a little recipe card in your box, and we'll be happy to share those with anyone who reaches out. And essentially, you want to use just a standard ice cream base recipe. I love a base recipe from the New York Times. We shared the link on your card. And so you approach that base recipe, which essentially is kind of very custardy, 6 eggs, cream, and you make that, and then you chill it overnight. And so while you're chilling it overnight in your fridge, while you're chilling that base, you're going to put 15 to 20 Cleveland sage leaves in that mixture. And overnight, next day, you're so excited because you're just about to make that ice cream. You're going to put that whole mixture through the cheesecloth or some type of sieve, and you're going to get rid of those leaves, and it's going to leave you with this just joyous mixture of sage ice cream that you'll then churn in your ice cream maker. So easy, and it just revolutionizes, the base, the vanilla ice cream base. So how awesome. Danielle, do you want to do any Q&As?
Yes, we have a few good questions. Let's see. First off, someone said that their 9-year-old daughter loves the coastal sage. Yum. We mentioned earlier it might be more of an adult acquired flavor, but this 9-year-old says she loves it. Okay, let's get into some questions here. So the first one I have, can the leaves be harvested at any time of the year to make ice cream or the pesto we were talking about?
They virtually can, although you'll notice that in summer, some of our sages go what you call summer deciduous, and they just kind of start to die back in this intense heat that we might have. And so I recommend not really harvesting or over harvesting in this time period because you might damage the plant in the process. You're going to get maybe just some not that fun looking leaves that you don't really want to put in your ice cream base. But you can technically, and one way around that is to grow plants in a pot because you can keep those watered more frequently, and you can keep sages that are in a container and watered slightly more often than, say, in the ground. You can keep those looking fresher for a lot longer. So there's different ways to approach it.
Great. Okay, let's see. So we touched on it earlier. What is another type of native sage that we can recommend for planting to A, attract pollinators, and B, use in an ice cream recipe?
I'll throw the ecology question to Lucinda, and I can follow up with the recipes.
Oh, there are just so many, and it depends on what you want to use them for and where in your garden you want to put them. So, for example, a salvia that I really like is the hummingbird sage, which, as you will know, is pollinated by hummingbirds, has red flowers about that long. That plant actually likes a little bit of shade, at least in our area, and a little more water. Not a huge amount of water, not as much as your lawn or anything like that, but with a little bit of water, it stays really green and beautiful all summer long. And then it will flower sporadically all summer long as well. Lower stature, but really excellent. And the leaves are really, really good for the same purposes as Cleveland sage. A good thing about the hummingbird sage, the issue that David just alluded to, where the leaves of Cleveland sage kind of harden up as the summer goes on. It gets very hot. The plant is kind of going dormant because it really doesn't want summer water. The hummingbird sage likes a little summer water, and so you can actually keep watering it and keep it making fresh, tender green leaves that you can use for all kinds of things, including pesto, including ice cream, including tea.
Right. Awesome point. And I would also recommend black sage again. That's one of my all-time favorites. It's not one of the most showy plants in a garden setting, but what I would recommend is using a cultivar called Terra Seca. And so again, that is a straight black sage, genetically speaking, plant, but you're going to get this gorgeous emerald carpet. And I have a few of those, and I use black sage in my ice cream a lot, and really love that flavor. One that I have not made yet, but I'm super curious, is white sage. I don't think that would taste very good, but I'm always willing to try. I for every good recipe, I probably have 10 that just failed miserably. So we'll see.
Earlier, we tried pesto with white sage, and it's just too strong. It is just really, really very, very powerful. And of course, in pesto, you're really eating the leaves. You're not just letting some of the lovely chemical essence kind of steep out of it into the cream or into your tea. So that's a bit different. I think it's worth a try. You would just try a little bit to begin with. It's easier to put more in than it is to get it out if you've put too much in.
Awesome. All right, well, Danielle, maybe you have one more question and then we'll go on to the next ice cream flavor.
Yes, I will give you one question, but just one comment. We have a few people asking about the sage pesto just because we've mentioned it a couple times. If you all respond to the email that I sent about the Zoom link, I will send you all a sage pesto recipe. A bunch of people are asking for one. So
great.
Respond to my email and I will send it out to everybody. So that's for everybody asking for a recipe. Let's see here. Someone asked if we could please elaborate on the burnishing of the sage leaves that you mentioned in the recipe.
Yeah, absolutely. So that sounds super technical. All it is you take a spoon and you use the back side of the spoon and you rub it a few times on the sage leaf, and that's going to activate the aroma a little bit more intensely than if you just threw the sage leaf into the mixture. So that's what you want to do in the recipe.
So is it it's like crushing them, or?
Yeah, you could crush them. Maybe burnish is just slightly more elegant.
Okay.
You just want to really activate the flavor. Yeah. Okay, great. Let me go forward because I know you all probably want the next flavor. I'm going to share my screen here. The next flavor is Cactus Cream. Okay, so everyone get your beautiful pink little pint here. And I'm going to stop the screen just one more time here and dig in. Beautiful pink color. That does not come from the pads. We weren't daring enough to put the full pads and spines into your ice cream. The flavor comes from the magenta hued fruits. In Spanish, they're called tunas. And they are delicious. Surprisingly, as you'll probably encounter, you think that this might have an insanely saturated or fruity flavor, but it's actually quite subtle. It's almost like a melon. I think, Danielle, did you say it tasted like maybe bubble gum? I thought there was kind of or cotton candy, maybe.
Yes, someone was like, oh, this is kind of like bubble gum, cotton candy. It's good. Whatever it is, it's good.
It's very subtle. I call it almost like a honeydew melon kind of flavor.
It's good. It's really different from the sage, which is good. It's good to have variety, huh?
Yeah. And it is considered a superfood, although maybe not in the context of sugar and cream. But cactus are noted, both the fruits and the green, which are used to make tortillas and other types of ingredients, are a superfood. Oh wow! Told you, my favorite event, native plants and ice cream. How great. All right, so while you're all enjoying, we'll start up again. So that was the wonderful Cactus Cream. And so Lucinda, can you tell us a little bit about the plant science behind prickly pears, or Opuntia species.
Sure. So David, do you mind going back to that previous slide?
Sure.
Because one of the things I want to say is that when we talked about sage, we talked about the fact that what we are enjoying as this lovely kind of spicy flavor is related to plant defense. And in the case of our cactus, the fruits of our Opuntia, our prickly pears, the opposite is the case. What the plant is trying to do now is to signal to animals to come hither and eat these fruits. And when they eat the fruits, there are seeds inside. And in most cases, the seeds enjoy a brief respite inside of the animal and then get deposited outside of the animal in a happy little pile of fertilizer. And so that's what they're doing. In this case, they're making themselves very appealing. And so these fruits really have very little in the way of chemicals that would make them at all noxious to anything. The plant really wants these things to be taken off and distributed about as part of its reproduction, its scheme for using animals in its own reproduction. So go ahead then, David.
And I heard too, and maybe this is just with the column or the barrel cactus, but aren't the green pads actually what you might call toxic? They're basic, so they don't necessarily want to be eaten. And so those have different defense mechanisms.
Yeah, they're completely different. Although we eat those as well, and they're called nopales. But it's mainly in the case of cacti, the fruits of essentially any cactus are edible, so far as I know, by us and by other animals. And but it's really only the pads of nopales, these particular ones, Opuntias, that are eaten, and they've been eaten for centuries and centuries and centuries by the first people to inhabit the New World. They've been known to be very, very good food. You can get eggs with nopales in them, and you can also get tacos de nopales. They're very, very good. But we're about the fruit, and the fruit starts with the flower. These are cactus flowers, obviously, on the edges of these pads. And I think the next slide will show you what it looks like inside of those flowers. Nope, we're back to the fruit. So let me just take advantage of this to tell you to be very, very careful if you handle this fruit. Each of those little sort of bumps that has little spines sticking out of it, the spines obviously are likely to cause you trouble, but perhaps even worse are the little tiny sort of fuzzy looking things. Those are called glockids, Glochids. And those you practically have to sand whatever body part you get those into to get rid of them. They are just very, very hard to get rid of. So this plant is basically defending that fruit until it's really, really ripe. What people do to process these is to kind of take them off the plant. I recommend tongs, and then you can kind of sand them or rub them actually in sand. Light sandpaper works well too to get those things off before you to get you into the fruit. You can also just cut it open, trying to avoid any of the glockids or spines, and kind of scoop it out. That's another way to go about doing it.
And I've used a little culinary blowtorch just super quickly.
You can do that as well if you're into culinary torches. I've never been a fan of torches in the kitchen, really.
Right.
Doesn't seem wise, but some of my best friends are so. So if this is a flower looking down into the functional parts, those really beautiful sort of shiny green things in the middle, that's the female reproductive part where the pollen needs to get. And then the things around the edge that the bee is a little bit obsessed with, those are the pollen making structures. And what that bee is doing, by the way, there's a group of bees that specialize on cactus flowers, on Opuntia flowers, and they collect the pollen. These are native bees. So one of the best ways to get native bees is to plant an Opuntia. Because the bees come where there's Opuntia. What the bee is doing is collecting pollen, and she's got, can you see her legs there? How to describe where they are? They're at about 245, sticking up away from the central part of the flower. That's her leg, and she's got lots of pollen grains stuck in there, and she's taking that back to her nest, because she uses that pollen to provision her nest for her young. These are solitary bees. They are not bees that have large colonies. They are ground nesting bees. They are essentially harmless. It's said that you have to sort of write one a formal invitation and teach it how to sting you if you want to get stung, because they just don't do that. They're not like honeybees at all, and they're not like wasps at all. They're very safe, friendly ground nesting bees, and they're, as I said, native. So it's a great way to get native bees is to do that. And this flower looks just big and open and welcoming to everybody, but really these bees specialize on the pollen. You can actually see the separate pollen grains there. This group has really big pollen grains. Again, that green in the middle is the female part, which actually isn't open yet, which is interesting. And then the other really fun thing about opuntias is that there is a scale insect that specializes on them. And the scale insect it's the scale insect that's in there that makes these white, almost like foamy patches. And we routinely get questions into our info@calbg.org question line about what are these white things that are all over my cactus and what should I do about it? And if you were a person living sort of closer to the land than most of us are, you would be very glad that your cactus had those, because they turn out to be a major source of dye. And this shows a person who has simply taken some of that red fuzzy stuff off and smeared it, and basically you're breaking the insects, and they have this red pigment. It's carmine is the kind of red that it's called. This red dye has been used since at least the 1500s, and probably much longer than that. We just know since the 1500s because Europeans have been recording since the 1500s. And it's a very important dye for Native Americans throughout the Americas. So opuntias occur throughout the arid parts of the Americas, and so that dye is extremely valuable. In terms of commercial uses, it sort of got replaced by red dye number this, that, and the other thing. But then those of you who are old enough will know that there's been lots of concern about the toxicity of some of those artificially made dyes, and so there's kind of a trend to go back to these natural dyes, which are not harmful. A beautiful opuntia in full flower. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, so I grew up in Texas, and I'm very familiar with prickly pear cactus, and they're gorgeous. I'm also very familiar with falling into them occasionally, but they are wonderful, and the flowers just there. I mean, aren't those just absolutely stunning? And we just treasure the moments here in the garden when they're blooming. There's lots of different opuntias that you can consider. One of my favorites is Opuntia basilaris, which is the beaver tail cactus. It's smaller in stature than, say, your Opuntia engelmannii or your coast prickly pear. And sometimes you can get them in this, and it might be a cultivar, but this beautiful purple tinged hue, just absolutely gorgeous. We have one as you're just walking into the garden. You just go past the wildflower meadow, and there's one on your right. So check it out next time you're here. Really gorgeous plant. And then, of course, in the summer, kind of that in-between time, between late spring and midsummer, you'll see these gorgeous flowers, and they're a showstopper. In Texas, they came in hues ranging the whole gamut of warm tones, from orange to yellow. And I've noticed that to be true in some of our opuntias here. Although, for instance, basilaris, you're going to get this gorgeous magenta hued flower. So all around great. Of course, you're just going to want to avoid the spines, which are not fun, and the glochids that Lucinda mentioned on the fruits. So beautiful plant, and the native pollinators will thank you for it. All right, and then some recipe notes. So we have the honor of working with Sherry's Desert Harvest, and that's who I recommend you go to instead of making this syrup on your own. Sherry's Desert Harvest in Tucson harvests from cactus that they have grown on site, and it is a native species, Opuntia engelmannii, both to Arizona and then just part of California. And it's all natural, so the ingredients are on the website. Essentially, 99% cactus fruit. But also they use just a little bit of pectin for preservative and lemon, I think. So that is what is in your ice cream tonight. And it's great, virtually all natural, and just adds that really delicious tint to the ice cream. I will tell you that I've added too much syrup in this ice cream recipe before, and that's going to break down the chemistry and not freeze correctly. You're going to get something a little bit more akin to maybe a sherbet or a gelato or something that just doesn't even congeal at all. So you want to really limit yourself to that 1 cup or even less. And it's a subtle ice cream flavor. I dare you to find an ingredient that might pair with that cactus to make it really pop, because it would be cool to see that. But I also appreciate just how subtle and wonderful it is for a hot summer day. All right. So I'm going to break out into the question and answer section now.
Yes, back for the back for the prickly pear. Okay, I have some great questions here for prickly pear. Someone mentioned that they had a really yummy prickly pear and pecan ice cream. They're wondering if we have any other suggestions for more complimentary flavors.
That's amazing. I don't, but that I would love to taste that.
Yeah, it does sound pretty good.
Yeah, that really is amazing. And, pecans are native to the New World as well. Not native to right here. We have walnuts, native walnuts, but pecans are native to the New World. So it's interesting that those would pair well together. But in my opinion, pecans go with almost anything, really.
Yeah, great. All right, we have a couple of quick answer ones. Can you eat the fruit raw?
You can. You have to be really careful with the glochids and the spines, but you can. They, I think, people, in my experience, people and also people tend to harvest them before they're completely ripe. You really want to let them really, really ripen up, and that can be hard because there's competition for them from others in your vicinity. Who might get to them before they're really completely ripe. But you can. They're certainly not bad for you.
Great.
As good as this ice cream, though.
Yeah, they sure are. Another good one that is recipe specific. Can honey be substituted for the sugar in the basic recipe?
It absolutely can. Again, I would watch though, just with you might want to lower the amount of cactus syrup because you just want to watch the amount of kind of semi-liquidous stuff you're putting in that base, because that could harm the kind of congealing of the ice cream when you go to churn it. So if you used honey, I would probably just take maybe the same amount out of the cactus syrup to keep it all things equal.
Great. Okay, I have a comment and then one more good question. The comment was they want to know about the beautiful chalkboard artwork behind you, and it's also on the box. Can you tell us about Paige's work?
I can, yes. We're so delighted. Paige Timon, she is our Getty Exhibitions intern, and she happens to be an amazing artist as well. So she has left her mark all over these amazing boxes and behind me. I'm so honored to have her work glowing behind Lucinda and I. So fun. And of course, in all the boxes behind you.
All right, and then the last really good question. What are ways that we can support our valuable pollinators like bees that we mentioned in our local communities?
Great question. I mean, I'll throw it to Lucinda, but essentially what's been said is, you plant these native plants and the pollinators will come. So I've seen some of our native bees in our opuntias here. And so, growing native plants in your yard is an amazing way to bring wildlife in.
That's exactly what I would say is plant the plants and they will come. Especially, as we are learning in the native plant movement, as if you plant your area, your landscape with a lot of natives, and you convince a neighbor to do the same, you get what's basically referred to as block contagion. And next thing you know, most of the yards in your neighborhood have at least some native plants. I've heard people come to our front yard and say to their gardener, I want one of those and one of those and one of those.
That's great.
And so, that's really good. So the point of that is that if you're just a tiny island in a sea of lawn, which is not hospitable to the vast majority of native animals. I mean, coyotes will stand around on it for a while. Yeah. Then but if you can have your neighbors who are doing kind of the same and making good habitat, then next thing you know, you've got all of these great and native pollinators and animals that eat the seeds like the birds. It's just terrific to have the finches and the bush tits in great masses in your yard when these plants are in fruit. I just love it. Absolutely love it.
I want to say too, if you don't have a property or you don't have a lot of land around you at your house,
Pots.
Pots are amazing. And I lived for a few years in Hollywood, and we just were in an apartment, and we had native plants in pots. And it was just amazing to see hummingbirds visit those plants, pollinators, little insects, nondescript insects that I couldn't identify, but they will come, even if you're in a third floor balcony in downtown Hollywood, they'll find you. And thank you for it.
Yeah.
I actually just got another good question. How are the tunas meant to attract animals when they have the spines and the glochids?
So what the idea is that the plant is defending the fruit until it is ripe. The part of the ripening process of the fruit is not just to ripen the part that you want to eat, that the coyotes want to eat, but it's ripening the seeds. So if a fruit gets dispersed, gets taken off of the plant before the seeds are ripe, then that's no good for the plant's reproduction. And so the plant is basically defending that fruit until it's ripe, and ready to go, and the seeds are ready to be dispersed. That's what's going on.
Awesome.
Great.
We have time for just one more question, and then we'll get to the coyote mint chip.
I think that's it.
Oh,
Yeah,
good. Okay,
that
great.
was my wrap it up question.
Right. Well,
I
here
would
we
just say
go.
one more thing about pots, which is try anything in a pot. We get questions again all the time. Can I do this in a pot? And the answer is try it. It may not grow as big as it would grow when it's in the ground. It may behave a little differently, but try it. It will almost certainly be great and a great experience for you.
Now, maybe I'm just a tad biased. This is my favorite flavor, and maybe it's because it's chocolate, but I think it's because the coyote mint also complements the chocolate in such an amazing way. So everyone get out your coyote mint chip ice cream pint right here, and let's dig in. It's hard to go wrong with chocolate as a great base.
Mm.
Oh, wow, that's great.
This one's my favorite too.
It's awfully good. It's been really fun, by the way, working with Bert and Rockies on these ice creams, because they have forced us to try some in advance. It's been hardship duty, serious hardship duty, but we've provided them with some feedback, and a couple have benefited from our feedback, and they were good to begin with, but they're really great now.
Oh my, it's so good.
I called it quality control when anybody would catch me eating the ice cream samples. It's quality control. Come on.
We had to eat it every 4 hours to make sure the quality, the interval was fine.
Yeah.
Oh my, well, excuse me. While you are all enjoying that, we are going to go into our presentation. All right, so here's the ingredients in our delightful coyote mint chip. And it includes, on a home scale, about 20 to 30 leaves, so more than your sage leaves, which are bigger. And we'll get into the leaf morphology in just a second, but you're going to want to use more. So, Lucinda, can you give us the botanical backstory of our Monardella or coyote mint species?
So this is, well, it's kind of my favorite ice cream because I'm a chocolate person. But in many ways, these are also my favorite plants. This is a very good example of a group that is highly specialized for our Mediterranean climate here in California. There are only 40 species of Monardella in the whole world, and 32 of them occur in California.
Wow.
Including 2 actually that are lamentably extinct, one of which is basically under the 10 out by Rialto, or at least that's where it was. But 30 extant species are still cruising along in California. It's in the mint family again, and again, the leaves, the fragrance that's in the leaves, and to some degrees also in the reproductive parts, are emblematic of trying to keep herbivores from eating the plant up. And those of you who visit the garden often will have seen these plants in Fays Meadow. And they are one of the few things that we plant there that doesn't get absolutely chewed to the ground by our abundant bunnies and abundant ground squirrels. These flowers will look kind of familiar to you, and you probably get the idea if you've been paying attention to the botanical lessons so far. The part sticking out with the little sort of T shape at the apex, that's the female part. And then the purple things that are sort of crescents down a little bit lower, those are the parts that have the pollen grains in them. All coyote mints make these sort of dense heads of flowers. And they have the same kind of fruit situation that your salvias had, with little tiny seeds that are dispersed mostly by birds. But they're just gorgeous plants. They're really fun to grow. I love to grow coyote mint. So there's one in full flower. I think this is the species that we are eating today. And then in the background there, you can see some that are going into seeds, some heads that are going into seeds. This is one of my favorites. This is one is also kind of fussy to grow, but it's worth it. It's so beautiful. This one is called Monardella macrantha, which just means big flowers, and the flowers are about that long, and it's hummingbird pollinated, as you can infer from this. And it's just a terrific plant, macrantha, and we sell it at the Grow Native Nursery. We sell these plants that we're sharing with you today when the nursery is open. Great plant. This is another Monardella that's obviously up. There's some that occur at high elevation. There's some that occur in our deserts. There's some that occur right around us at our same elevation. They basically are specialized for almost all habitats across California. Desert, as I said, they are, because it's kind of a dune habitat, and there's a species that occurs on those. It's really a great group of plants. I try to grow as many species as we can. Again, these are pollinated significantly by butterflies who love to probe the individual flowers for nectar. And my guess is that this animal is a pretty good pollinator. As we said, not all animals that visit flowers are super good pollinators. A swallowtail on that one, likely a good pollinator. Isn't that a beautiful plant? Look Absolutely. At those beautiful lines on the bracts there. Just gorgeous.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see here, this one's growing in a container, like we're talking about. I will tell you, so I've grown coyote mint for about 2 years in my backyard, and I say the first year looked like a twig with leaves. And so don't be discouraged. In fact, that's how a lot of our Monardellas start out in the garden. You just have to remain, hopeful that they'll pop out. But by typically the second year, my mom has this great saying, they creep, they crawl, they run. So the first year they creep, second year they crawl, the third year they run. And I think that's pretty true with Monardella. By that second or third year, now that almost into our third year, our Monardella or coyote mint's just this big, gorgeous, accent shrub. So don't be discouraged. I will recommend the one down in our wildflower meadow is called a cultivar called Russian River. And that one's a really beautiful Monardella species or specimen, and big purple pom-pom still blooming. In fact, I think that one blooms for quite a long time. Some of the other species, I think Villosa has a more lighter kind of tinge of color in the flowers, and just kind of smaller, narrower leaves. And then, of course, the gorgeous red one, being slightly more of an alpine or higher elevation plant, you might have trouble establishing it here, but give it a shot. And containers are always a good kind of trial experiment. You do need, so like I mentioned at the beginning of this segment, and I'll go into the recipe here, you do need about 20 to 30 leaves because they are smaller. And you'll really want to burnish these or just kind of move them around, crush them up a little bit. And it won't be long before your whole kitchen smells like this glorious kind of wild mint. And it's really wonderful. You do the same thing in the recipe as you do in the sage. So you make your mixture according to the New York Times base recipe. You throw about 20 to 30 leaves in that mixture, let it sit overnight, and then you're ready to churn it after you put it through a cheesecloth or a sieve to get the leaves out. So really, really easy, and you don't still not need a tremendous amount. 20 to 30 leaves might sound like a lot, but you'll pick it from one shrub, and the shrub will still look really healthy and happy. So All right, well, we're here at the end of our segment, and we want to open it up for question and answer. We're so delighted to hear what you thought about your ice creams.
All right, we have some good Coyote Mint chip questions, and then I also have some good general questions. I'll get to the general ones later. So for our recipe for the Coyote Mint chip, how much cocoa powder do we add?
You know what? That's an amazing question.
Sorry, you on the spot.
I gave you the recipe for the vanilla, which is what I normally make. So I'm going to have to get with Bert and Rocky's and figure out how much to add in this chocolate recipe. You uncovered a secret. You're reading.
Okay,
Great
so
question. We'll get you the answer.
Yes, I'll email everybody.
Okay.
Great question for that one. Okay, let's see. So, do we use whole mint leaves, or is it just juice, for example?
Yes, you use the whole mint leaf. They're not that big. They're only about that big. And so you want to put the whole thing into the batter, and a cheesecloth will take them right out, when you're ready to churn the ice cream.
Okay, great. And then let's see. Someone has some plant advice question. They have coyote mint in their yard, but they say it really struggles. Right now it's part sun and lots of holly oak leaves. Should they move it?
So I just answered that one offline and
sorry.
offline only. But and it's just, it's hard to say. I actually I'm with you and find these can be a little challenging to grow. And sure, you could try moving it. I mean, you can try almost anything. Keep in mind that California native plants have only been in cultivation for decades, not for thousands of years, like dates and figs and things like that. And so we're all really learning how to grow these things. I find that most monardellas like a little bit of a mound of kind of put a big rock by them so that they can get their roots kind of down under the rock. I find that they really like that kind of a situation in my garden, at least. But yeah, move it. Don't move it. Well, it's hard to say. But yeah, you might move it right. Go ahead and move it right now. But if you do, move it into a shadier place right now and give it a bit of supplemental water until it gets established.
Okay, let's see. Someone said that they love David's shirt and they want to know if it's vintage.
No, not vintage. It's actually from REI, and they came out with a great hiking set of clothes. But don't buy it. I'm the only one that gets to wear it.
Oh, that's funny. Let's see here. Are any of the plants that we talked about today toxic to dogs or cats?
Great question. I don't think so, just by the assumption that they're not to us, but I'm thinking through if maybe any of the roots or the other parts of the plant might be. Of course, the cactus might be dangerous to a dog who's not paying attention, but
yeah, I wouldn't. To my knowledge, none are dangerous to domestic animals from the perspective of being eaten, of them eating them. And actually, there's an opuntia, the one that is actually called tuna and has the very bizarre species name of Ficus indica, which means fig of the Indies, and it's neither a fig nor from the real Indies. But that plant is planted all around the world, partly as kind of fodder. So in case of crop failure or whatever, when people in Africa need fodder for their animals, they use that prickly pear. So it certainly isn't toxic. And I don't think, I guess there's animals that will eat almost anything, but I think most animals will not like the taste of either of sages or monardellas, but I know there are animals that eat everything. So, but I don't think that's particularly dangerous.
Okay, great. Let's see. Someone asked, how did we narrow down these 3 flavors or native plants of the ice cream? And then a follow-up question, is there a plant that's not blooming yet that we would love to try in the future for an ice cream?
Ooh, wow. Well, great questions. So I've been experimenting with native plants and ice cream for maybe 5 years. So I wanted to share the ones that made me the most excited. And the monardella is just amazing. You can't talk about native plant ice cream without sages, so that felt like important to share. cactus fruit just because it's so delightfully pink. So kind of the inspiration was a Neapolitan set of ice creams. We could do many more. There's recipes that call for chocolate and bay laurel, just like one bay laurel leaf. We did bay laurel for Taste Wild, so I kind of wanted to give everyone something different. But there's lots. There's the plants that we use for, say, our Brew Wild Beer Festival include fragrant pitcher sage, which is the scientific name is Lepicinia fragrans, so it's not in the sage or salvia genus. Woolly blue curls, which I bet would make an amazing ice cream. I actually just have never tried that. So woolly blue curls are Trichostoma linatum. So lots of different ones. These are just the ones that I've made and thought were wonderful. You're lucky I did not give you a Big Basin sagebrush ice cream, which I once made and quickly threw out. That's probably the only ice cream I've ever thrown out, but not good. So yeah, that's the inspiration. And then the other question was what other plants might be?
Yeah, what's not blooming right now that we would maybe like to try, like, a different time of the year?
Oh, like that's not seasonal or like not.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, season is what I'm getting after. Yeah.
Oh, good question. I mean, there's certain things, certain floral things are red bud. This beautiful tree, the flowers are actually edible and make like a nice little nectary snack. Manzanita blossoms, I'd love to do a manzanita blossom ice cream. You can make essentially a jelly or a jam with manzanita blossoms, and I like to get the most pink tinged blossoms in the winter. And then you make essentially a juice and turn that into a jelly. And so I'd love to try to experiment to graft that flavor, which is really wonderful, into an ice cream flavor. So that would be cool.
I wonder if sambucus,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, would be good. Elderberry would be good.
Right.
I bet that has potential.
Let's see. We have so many great ones coming in. Hot question of the night. Is there any chance that Bert and Rocky's will be selling any of these flavors at their shop? Hot question.
If I have anything to say about it, which I don't, but I would love to. We would love to see a partnership go forward. And again, Jolene's just been so amazing to work with. No plans yet, but stay tuned.
I have answered a couple of you who posed that question, just to say, when you go into Bert and Rocky's, ask them to stock these ice creams and thank them for being involved in this this program. They've been great to work with. If it had been up to us, we would have someone from Bert and Rocky's on this webinar with us, but they're shyer than we are.
Let's see, we had a great comment. Someone said, we love them all. 4 generations together are tasting tonight, ranging from ages 6 to 90. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Oh, that's so great.
We have another one here. The comment, consumer pressure, love it. for Bert and Rocky's. Okay, let's see. Another great question we have here is, how can we continue to support the creative and educational efforts of California Botanic Garden during this challenging time?
Oh, well, I'll start and then Lucinda can follow up, but I just keep attending. We think these are just great events, and we're really excited to find ways to build more bridges. We want to have Brew Wild this fall, so we're going to be working hard to make that a reality, and that'll be a beer curbside event. But just keep attending, and also any donations or just outright support for our programs are just so appreciated, and they'll go a long way to helping our education and visitor experience programming move forward with this kind of new paradigm that we're in. But we're just so glad you're in it with us.
Yeah, we're so glad you're enthusiastic about this. Share the word. Let your friends know. We just had a group from Cal Poly come to have a socially distanced tour of the grounds in this hot weather. And the kids, their young people didn't know about it. So we encourage them to get on our website, get on our email distribution list. Then you'll get the emails about these things, and you'll be among the first to know. We sold out of this. So there are people who wanted to get ice cream, but actually were not able to. Somebody also asked about what our next event is. And I'm not sure what exactly the next one is, but one thing that we're looking at doing again soon is Arrange Wild. Arrange Wild basically involves picking up a pail with plant material in it, and then a box with all of the other things that you need to make a beautiful native plant arrangement, and then attending a webinar where the wonderful person who heads up our native designs group walks you through how to do it. We've done one of those so far, and it sold out instantaneously, and it had a pretty small cap in terms of number of people related to the fact that it was way in late spring by that point, and we couldn't cut as many things as we would have liked to. So we're hoping to let more people participate this time. So just be sure you're on our email distribution list. Be sure that you get our emails about these events. Send them to your friends, send them to your family members, share. If you can afford to, go ahead and get the VIP box, which has a few extra things and actually helps to cover the staff time that's involved in doing all of this. Round up if you can, it's all very much appreciated. I'm so glad that so many of you appreciate the creative effort that has gone into this. We're really doing our best to stay relevant to all of you and your friends and your families in this super challenging time, and also to help you with the boredom caused by the pandemic and help keep your kids entertained, and all of those things rolled into one. So we just really appreciate you being part of our garden family, and we'll keep it coming.
Let's see. We have more comments. Big fans about the sage ice cream for breakfast.
Ooh, yeah.
We had folks. I just want to. Someone shared how far they drove to come pick up. This particular comment said they drove from Santa Monica, but we had people drive from Ventura County all the way to San Diego County.
Wow.
In the middle.
Amazing. Thank you.
So thank you. Let's see. Do we know what species of Monardello we used?
It's odoratissima. Monardella odoratissima, and it's actually from the cultivar, the Russian River.
Perfect. All right. Let's see.
And the cultivar just means actually that it was probably a plant. It probably came from somewhere up by Russian River, and it was a plant that did particularly well in cultivation. That's often what happens in these cases. You might be growing a wide variety or a number of seeds that you planted that came up from this one collection of seeds that you made. And this one plant in particular just is really good, grows really well, and is adapted to a garden setting. And so then that one gets propagated and it becomes a Russian River cultivar.
All right, let's see. Someone asked, what about fuchsia flowers?
Ooh, like epilobium, fuchsia.
So fuchsia is so there you have the slight problem of the common name. If you mean California fuchsia, I would have to say I don't know, and that's we'd have to do a little bit of research on there to make sure that there weren't any issues. But it certainly is. They certainly are beautiful flowers. If you mean the other fuchsia that is sold in the trade, that's not a native California flower, and so it's not something that we would use. But they're actually in the same plant family, so in that case, that's the common name isn't so confusing. But we'd have to see. Why I'm curious as to why the person who suggested that thinks it would be particularly good. Is it the color, or is it? I don't think of that plant family as being particularly odoriferous or pungent or anything. But it's worth a try. David's going to try it. I see him.
Yeah, he's taking notes. He's taking notes.
Lots of nectar, and so that could be something that could be really good. And there's only one plant that I know of that has poisonous nectar, and it doesn't occur in California. So
another good question. When will the YouTube video of this recording be available?
Should be sometime ASAP tomorrow. We'll download it tonight and get it up for you tomorrow.
Great. Let's see. Do we have any leftovers that people can purchase? That's also a hot question, hot item question.
Yeah, we do have some leftovers. If I don't eat them all, we'll have a flash sale. We're aiming to have a flash sale in the coming weeks. So stay tuned. Sign up on that email account because we'll let you know when we're going live with that sale of any pints that we might have left over.
Let's see. Someone asked, how about lavender for ice cream? It's not native, but I've had lavender ice cream before.
Yeah, absolutely. Great ice cream. Just we wouldn't grow it, but super tasty.
All
And
right.
it is related to sage and to monardella. So you're action driven. You've got a really good idea there. You've got a good thing going in terms of thinking about lavender.
Okay, great. I guess unless we have any last minute questions being typed right now, I think I might.
All right. Well, we'll close it out there. And if you have any other questions, just feel free to email us. We're a pretty responsive group, and we'd love to know what thoughts you have or what questions you have. Send them over to our email address at info@calbg. That's CALBG.org. And I just wanted to thank our panelists tonight. Danielle, thank you so much for being our moderator. And Lucinda, thank you so much for being an expert here, an expert panelist, and sharing your insights.
It was a blast.
Awesome.
Thank everybody for being here.
Yes, and I just wanted to give a shout out, just acknowledging and honoring the Tongva culture and all California Native American groups that have stewarded culinary legacies for thousands of years. And so just a shout out to that. And we're super excited for the next event where we can bring you some flavors of California and bring you more into the fold of the world of native plants. So thanks for joining us. All right, bye everyone.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Great you could join.